All right, blessed to be with you. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. We are joined by Russ Bevel from the Boise Hemp Fest, and a person of, well, international fame, had a show on satellite radio, knows all about radio. You were giving me your local bona fides, and I can't do you justice, Russ, so if you could talk a little bit about Nampa High, Buster Bronco, and that sort of thing.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was born in Nampa, Idaho. I was the son of two Idaho natives, one from eastern Idaho, one from Nampa. And I attended Nampa High School, class of 85. I was a Boise State student from 85 to 89, where I had the opportunity to be the alternate Buster Bronco. In fact, I was the last Buster Bronco on green turf there at Boise State, and served 6 years in the Idaho National Guard, achieved Soldier of the Year one of those years, and then moved to Oregon in 2003.
And in your time in Oregon, what did you do?
Well, I moved to Oregon in 2003 because at the time I was married and my wife was in desperate need of medical cannabis, and I wasn't going to take the risk of us getting arrested in this state. So we moved to Oregon, and from that point, I got involved with the Oregon chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And since that time, I have been pretty much a full-time advocate for the liberalization of cannabis laws throughout the United States.
All right, and we will be taking your calls on this at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You're also with Boise Hemp Fest, the big event coming up.
That's right. Of course, the 420 event, April 20th, is commonly known in our community as a day of celebration, and that's happening this Saturday at the Julia Davis Park from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. We'll have speakers and bands and dancers and all sorts of information for people to learn about medical cannabis, about the fight to end marijuana prohibition. We'll have everything there except marijuana, because this is Idaho.
Well, and we're going to get into that. And again, Russ, I appreciate you coming in and the spirit of dialogue. So often in the world today, we don't have it. You and I are going to disagree, but that's okay. I already can sense your passion and such, and your voice sounds very familiar, so I'm sure I've caught your show. So let's talk a little bit about this. Do you believe here on KIDO Talk Radio that Idaho one day will be a state that legalizes not only medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana, sir?
Yes, with the caveat, it depends on how we define it. I always like to talk about ending the prohibition of marijuana, because that talks about ceasing the arrest and the imprisonment of people who are growing and consuming a houseplant. Now, how we structure that legally is probably going to be a whole lot different in Idaho than it would be in California or New York, for certain. As far as I'm concerned, as long as we just stop the arrest and imprisonment of people, I'm not concerned too much about how we set up the legality after that.
Sure, but when we take a look at marijuana, it is illegal federally.
Yeah.
How do you respond to states that have legalized it or breaking federal law?
Well, states have their own sovereignty to be able to set up the laws as they choose. And as we see throughout the world, the trend now is to move away from that international standard of cannabis prohibition. Canada's legalized. Mexico is about to legalize. 10 states in the United States, 2 territories in the District of Columbia have legalized. And every state but 4, and Idaho's one of them, every state but 4 has some medical form of cannabis. So I really see this as the future. If you don't like marijuana, you're not going to like the future very much, because this is the way things are turning out.
Sure, but banks can still not do business with the cannabis folks, with the marijuana folks. It is still illegal federally. And, if states' rights really existed, you would have Idaho having traditional marriage and not gay marriage. I mean, we live in a hypocritical sort of world. Like the federal government has legalized hemp, but Idaho hasn't. So it's a role reversal with hemp.
It's a little strange. And it's interesting to me, the perspective on this, because, I grew up here in Idaho, and I've got a lot of family that are conservative and very Christian, very religious. And one of the things they always liked about Idaho is that we believed in freedom. So we believe that people have the right to do with their lives what they choose, so long as they're not harming others.
Right.
And if we've got a state that believes, hey, no problem if you want to ride on the freeway 80 miles an hour without a helmet, no problem if you want to go buy illegal fireworks that you're not supposed to shoot in this state, wink, wink, no problem if you want to carry an AR-15 locked and loaded with a 100-round magazine into the state capitol, we got no problem with those freedoms, but we're afraid somebody with cancer might smoke a joint? Is Idaho so afraid of marijuana that we're willing to let cancer patients and AIDS patients and people with all sorts of disabilities suffer just because we're afraid of marijuana? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, the state has a very, and you as a native would know this, sir, a libertarian streak. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you take a look at other states that have legalized marijuana. We do want to let everybody know about Boise Hemp Fest and the like as well. But and we will during your time here, sir. But you look at states that have done this; they've had increased traffic fatalities. They've had their parks turned over to stinky parks, that sort of thing. If you could separate medical from recreational, it seems once you get medical, recreational is around the corner.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with the premise of some of the statements there. As far as the statistics go, when it comes to the states that have legalized or medicalized the use of cannabis, they've pretty much remained the same states they were before the legalization or medicalization of cannabis. This concept of there being more wrecks or more traffic fatalities, indeed, traffic fatalities have gone up in the United States over the past 3 or 4 years, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. But they've gone up all over. And numerous studies have shown that the legalization or the medicalization of cannabis is not causing more kids to use, is not causing more crime. These statistics are oftentimes generated by what are called the high-intensity drug trafficking areas. These are arms of the federal and local and state law enforcement communities that are trying to gin up any sort of scary statistic they can to save their grant money, to save their easy civil asset forfeitures, to save the marijuana prohibition and the magical phrase, I smell marijuana, that unlocks the Fourth and Fifth Amendment of anybody you pull over.
Russ Bevel joining us, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So let's talk about HempFest. Really, isn't this just a charade to get in medical marijuana in? I mean, you're going to have a cook there. I'm not going to lead the witness. I'm just going to let you respond, sir.
Okay, so Boise HempFest, with that idea, a lot of people, I've heard this so many times in my campaigns, is that, well, if we legalize medical marijuana, it's the camel's nose under the tent. And the next thing you know, they'll legalize it. Who will legalize it? The people. So if you're telling me that legalizing medical cannabis would change enough minds that a majority of voters would then support legalization, doesn't that say that the stand of the people opposing this is kind of a weak stand? That the only way you can keep it illegal is to keep it in the dark, keep it hidden, and keep throwing people in jail for it? Sounds like a weak position to me.
On the other hand, you talk to law enforcement. They're not down with this.
Of course not.
They agree with Kevin Miller.
Of course they're not down with this. If you're a cop working on the shift, would you rather deal with someone who's a meth freak who might get upset and shoot at you or come at you violently? Would you rather deal with a rapist or a robber where you have to do a whole lot of work, a whole lot of investigation? Or is it easier just to pull someone over, say you smell weed, find a joint, and then spend your next 3 hours doing overtime booking the guy, spend your overtime hours going to court, spend the time of the crime lab to evaluate that baggie of weed to ensure it's a baggie of weed rather than testing a rape kit? I mean, it's a total misprioritization of law enforcement resources.
You're getting emotional here.
Yeah, well, I have friends who have been sexually assaulted. I have friends who've been raped, whose cases languished because we've got this backlog of rape kits because these crime labs are so busy testing a baggie of herbs to make sure it's not oregano.
Now, on the other hand, states, Russ, that have legalized this, they've taxed the heck out of the legalized weed, and the black market continues. Black market's booming in Oregon.
Well, this is another misconception. Before legalization, 100% of marijuana sales were black market. After legalization, a certain percentage of those black market sales became legal market sales. Now, sure, some black market sales exist because Every market has a black market. There's a black market in CDs. There's a black market in counterfeit purses. There's even a black market in cigarettes if you want to count people that are driving to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation to get them tax-free and bring them back to Boise. So yeah, there is a black market, but it has gone down significantly because any sale that is a legal sale is one that has been taken away from the black market. Now, if these states that are
make it sound so normal, and pardon the interruption, but you make it sound so normal.
Well, it is. It is quite normal. There's no difference between me going to an adults only regulated store where I have to show ID to purchase some cannabis to take home and enjoy myself on an evening, as me going to a liquor store where it's a state-run place where I have to show ID, where I can get an intoxicant and take it home and enjoy myself. It is normal.
One is a mind-altering drug.
Both are a mind-altering drug. You don't think alcohol is a mind-altering drug?
Alcohol gets out of your system a lot faster than the dope.
Marijuana gets out of your system as far as its impairing effects within 2 to 3 hours. Now, what you're talking about, the in your system part, is the detection of inactive metabolites that can last from 72 hours to even a month in a heavy consumer like myself. Those inactive metabolites tell us nothing about whether someone is impaired at the time.
All right, Russ, we are going to have a great time with you. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. I can't wait to hear what Russ has to say about Boise Hemp Fest and some of my comments concerning lock 'em up. I'm not going to speak for you, sir. So we're going to have more coming up next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Blessed to be with you, Kevin Miller in the morning, and Russ Bevel joining us from Boise Hemp Fest. So really, Russ, you're very passionate. We love that about you. Tell us a little bit about your show that you had on satellite radio. What was that like?
So in 2006, during the middle of the second Bush term, the Center for American Progress put together a contest called The Search for the Next Great Progressive Talk Radio Star. And out of over 500 entrants, I won. So my prize was a 2-year stint on XM Satellite Radio's liberal channel, doing a political talk radio show. From there, I was hired by NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, to produce their podcast for 4 years. And for 6 years after that, I produced an independent podcast called The Russ Belville Show and pretty much focused on this issue, the end of adult marijuana prohibition.
So, in other words, your goal is to turn Idaho.
My goal, my number one goal at this point, and I'll be very selfish about this.
We like selfishness here and self-reporting selfishness.
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely selfish about this. As far as I was concerned, I was going to leave Idaho alone. I decided in 2003 Idaho wasn't the place for me. Idaho didn't want me, so I'll leave.
Because you're a lib.
Because I'm one of those libs, yeah. So, but what has brought me back is
a bunch of libs.
What has brought me back is my 77-year-old father. He suffers from chronic neuropathy and has to take 7 OxyContin a day to deal with his issue. And medical cannabis would help him so much more. But he was not going to move out of Idaho. He's a lifelong Idahoan. My mom is too. Everybody they know lives here. They wanted to stay in Idaho until the day they die. Unfortunately, that day is coming much quicker. His doctor has told him his kidneys are starting to shut down because of all the opioids. So I'm kind of furious that my father is trapped in a state that is surrounded by states where he could use cannabis medically, get off this OxyContin, and maybe add 5 or 6 years to his life. So that's why I'm here.
I believe that everybody, Russ, here on KIDO Talk Radio and in Idaho, if they could find a way to make medical marijuana legal, would do so. I think the biggest fear, sir, is that you have people that in California and other states that you're more familiar with than I am, everybody all of a sudden gets a card. They get $20 down at Laguna Beach and you get a card and because you have anxiety.
Okay. So first of all, how medical marijuana would proceed in Idaho under our proposed initiative would be far different than California. But I take your point. There are people, given any human system, somebody's going to try to find a way to cheat it. There's people who cheat food stamps. There's people who cheat welfare. There's people who cheat insurance, loans. There's all sorts of cheating going on. But we don't say, let's take food stamps away from everybody because this person over here is cheating on food stamps. I say, if you're worried that someone's going to cheat on medical marijuana, and that's your excuse for my dad having to die early because of kidney failure, it's a pretty sad excuse. And the people that you say would cheat and get their card, Do you think they're not smoking pot now? Because I can tell you, I smoked my first joint July 1st, 1990 in McCall, Idaho. And from July 1st, 1990 to January 1st, 2003, I smoked pot daily in Idaho.
You were breaking the law.
Breaking the law.
You're a lawbreaker.
I'm breaking the law right now.
What do you mean you're breaking the law right now?
Under Idaho law, it is against the law. It is a misdemeanor with a 3-month
Now,
jail
careful.
sentence.
We got a lot of law enforcement that listen. I don't want you being stuffed and cuffed and hauled away here, buddy.
Oh, they tried that.
But I don't want to be aiding and abetting either. So
They tried that one of the last times I was here. But the law in Idaho is it is illegal to be under the influence of a Schedule I controlled substance in public. Now, I was in Baker, Oregon last night, staying the night, and at about 10 at night, I smoked a joint before I went to bed. The THC from that joint is still in my system.
Now, wait a minute. I thought you said that it
It
gets
just-
out, gets out quicker than alcohol.
No, you're right. The metabolites. I'm sorry, I misspoke. The metabolites are still in my system.
Right. So
And
you're under the influence right now.
Yeah, the metabolites are in my system
That's
right
not
now.
good, Russ.
And under Idaho law, I could be arrested and put in jail right now. Now, I would
Well, you've just given every law enforcement person listening probable cause.
give it. Come on, bring it on.
Why would you do that? You
So
want to
that
go to
so
jail?
that I could challenge that law, and me and the ACLU could get it overturned.
You and the ACLU.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to be a patsy for you, huh?
I didn't intend it that way.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Traffic and weather together. By the way, people that disagree with me or agree with Russ, we want to hear from you. Good morning, Dave. All right, Russ, we've got people that are very excited about this. They think you're a great guy. And let's talk a little bit about Boise Hemp Fest. I've said,
Okay.
look, you hemp people are nice people, but this is the Trojan horse to get your beloved weed, the dope as I call it, the gateway drug, into our beloved state. Now, again, sir, much props to you. You're a native. Your family's a native. You've got us all coming in here. We don't want to tell you how to live your life, so I'm self-reporting. But the Hemp Fest, isn't this just a pro-pot rally?
Well, sure. It's a celebration of cannabis and all of its uses, the industrial uses of hemp, the medical uses of cannabis, and even the recreational uses of marijuana. But the idea that it's a Trojan horse, it's kind of a failed metaphor. The Trojan horse was solid. You could not see into it. You could not see what was coming. We're absolutely transparent. We believe adults should not be arrested, harassed, imprisoned, have their assets seized, their dogs shot, and their kids taken away over a houseplant.
Now, what do you mean their dog shot? That's going too far.
No, this happens all the time. I can show you numerous YouTube videos of SWAT raids on people for small amounts of marijuana, where one of the first things the officers do is shoot the dog to make sure that the dog will not interfere with the arrest.
Now, you're saying that the people that are, Russ, with all due respect, lawbreakers are victims.
Well,
That's
sure.
how I'm hearing. Well, they don't break the law. They don't smoke the weed. Then they don't have to worry about the SWAT people coming in.
Yeah, and if Jean Valjean doesn't steal the loaf of bread, he doesn't go to the French prison either.
Well, he knew what he was doing.
This idea, we keep coming back to the law. And under the law, there's two different types of laws that we have. Malum in se and malum prohibitum. Malum se are the types of laws that are things that are illegal because they're just morally illegal, just like rape or murder or theft. Everyone agrees they're illegal. There's also malum prohibitum, which are laws that are just breaking a rule. And rules are meant to be broken in some cases.
You know, you're sounding like a moral relativist. And
I may be a bit.
These multi-syllable words may intimidate me, which they do. However, you're a moral relativist.
Well,
what about the
I do
law?
think-
Is the law, sir?
Well, the law itself has relativism in it. There's assault, there's aggravated assault, there's manslaughter, there's murder. There's relativism all throughout the law. And in this case, we've got a law that is not just. It used to be against the law to harbor fugitive slaves. That was an unjust law. And as Dr. King told us, an unjust law is a law that is not worth respecting.
On the other hand, we go back to this. And by the way, we've got a ton of phone calls. We're going to get to you very soon. However, equating slavery to marijuana, that's a little extreme, isn't it?
Depends on if you've been busted for marijuana.
Well, then you don't smoke marijuana.
Well, again, we keep coming back to this. If you don't want to get busted, don't do it. Don't do if you don't like the crime, can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Just say no, Russ.
Right,
Just say no.
And we can see how well that's worked. When marijuana was first introduced in the United
It
States,
did back in our day in the 80s. You and I both know Nancy Reagan and that campaign worked.
It worked in the sense that it made people stop using marijuana and start using cocaine.
Well, but is it marijuana the gateway drug?
No, marijuana is the gateway away from drugs. It's the gateway my father needs to get off of opioids.
On the other hand, you look at the damage to your lungs from marijuana.
There is no damage to the lungs from marijuana.
Now,
According to
come
Dr.
on,
Donald
Russ.
Pashkin, in a world-renowned research study of 2006 from UCLA, one of the leading pulmonologists in the world did a 30-year retrospective of cannabis smokers and found that not only was there no higher incidence of lung cancer and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, there was actually a reduction in the risk of those diseases, partially because THC is a bronchodilator. It opens up the lungs.
Well,
it is not cannabis. It is not tobacco.
We're going to make sure that we have our medical professionals answer to you. Russ Bevel joining us. By the way, how do people get a hold of you? You're going to be here for an hour, but how are you?
Yeah.
How are people going to get a hold of you?
You can find me online as Radical Russ on just about everything that has a username.
Radical Russ.
That's right. I got that nickname in 7th grade at West Junior High School.
All right. More coming up with Radical Russ. More on the Boise Hemp Fest. We'll take your calls next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug. All right. Russell Bevel joining us. Now, you've got a little business. We want to make sure we promote that.
Oh, sure. I am the CEO of Delta 9 House. You can find us at delta9house.com. We offer 420 friendly lodging for short-term renters. So we have a house in Ontario, we have 3 mountain cabins in Sumter, Oregon, and we have a house in Portland, Oregon. So if you're traveling, looking for a place to stay where you're allowed to smoke marijuana in your room, look us up at delta9house.com.
And we've got a ton of people that want to speak with you. But how do you react to someone like me? And look, you've outed yourself as a lawbreaker. I'll out myself as a fatty. who will say, that was a quick laugh on that one.
No, I'm in that camp, so.
No worries. But who would say, look, when you smoke the dope, you have no initiative. You have no enthusiasm. You never meet anybody with any. They just want to sit in their room and vacation with Russ.
Yeah. So I've operated 2 or 3 successful businesses, a talk radio program, a nonprofit organization. This morning I was up at 3 a.m. to drive from Baker to get here. If marijuana is causing an amotivational syndrome, I hesitate to think how much more I would have gotten done without it. I mean,
aren't you the exception rather than the rule?
I don't think so. Almost everyone I know is a successful cannabis smoker. And I think part of the reason for this conception is something I like to call the iceberg effect. When you've got marijuana prohibition, it's like an iceberg, and you only see the tip of the iceberg. You only see the hippies and the freaks and the musicians and the artists and the people who are self-employed who stand to have very little to lose if they're outed as a cannabis consumer. Below that prohibition waterline are the teachers, the plumbers, the doctors, the lawyers, the parents, the vets, all the people that are using cannabis who have something to lose.
Would you want a doctor operating on you to have smoked a doobie the night before?
Sure. Why
Russ.
not? Why not? See, I think, Kevin, what you've got is a misconception of what cannabis does to someone. I told you I smoked marijuana 10 hours ago. Do you think I'm out of control? Do you think I'm some sort of crazy stoner, that I'd be a threat behind the wheel or a problem in public?
Well, we're going to agree to disagree. Let's go to Rex in Boise with our great friend Russ. Good morning. Radical Russ,
Good morning.
by the way. Radical Russ, yes.
Hey, I just wanted to bring up that I heard on the Lars Larson show the other night that pot's been being shown recently to increase your chance of being a psycho. I wanted you guys to discuss that with your 2 opinions.
This is something that's come about thanks to a book that's been written by a guy who claims that marijuana is going to turn you into some sort of psychotic axe murderer. And here's the facts about this. In 1937, when marijuana was first prohibited, there were 100,000 total marijuana smokers in America. Today, there are about 30 million marijuana smokers in America. And yet, the rates of schizophrenia and psychosis have remained at about 1%. For about the past century. So if marijuana was going to cause some sort of mass psychosis, it would have happened. We haven't seen it. This is not happening. What this guy is doing is taking anecdotes of someone who did something horrible, and he finds, oh, they are a pot smoker. And so he says, well, this happened, then that happened, therefore it's causal. It's not. It's a correlation. Some people do stupid things. Some people do bad things.
What about the traffic accidents that are up in Colorado because of people like you?
traffic accidents in Colorado.
Because they're under the influence of the dope.
Traffic accidents are up all around the United States.
Oh, no.
Traffic accidents are worse in Indiana, but we're not talking about Indiana being the fault of all the marijuana smokers there. These, again, are correlations.
Well, in myself, I'm like you, a probably 10-year, give or take, marijuana user regularly. I would be one of those people that has it in my system for at least 30 days. And I feel in myself that if I don't smoke, my attitude is way worse than if.
Well, where are you at? We're going to have someone come pick you up there, Rex.
I don't know why I would answer that question then.
Rex, anything else?
But in my own self, I've noticed that my attitude's a lot grumpier, and I could see the correlation that you could make it click if you don't have your weed, and that's absolutely a problem.
All right, Rex, thank you. Try the drug of my choice, fried chicken. Let's go to Roy in Emmett with Radical Russ. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Roy.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to your program for years, but haven't called in, so a little nervous about it. But I'm in healthcare. I'm a provider. My wife's a family therapist. I just put a kid in the hospital for a psychotic break, schizophrenic symptoms, and he spent 2 weeks in a mental hospital. My wife sees broken families and all kinds of psychological problems, all stemming from or correlated strongly to argue against Russ there to marijuana intake. It doesn't happen to everyone, and it doesn't happen like with one or two joints, but it happens with long-term use and frequent use. And the marijuana they have now, like in Oregon, is so much stronger. It's not the same.
Well, there's a few things in there. As far as the long-term use of very potent marijuana, I've been using for 29 years, almost every day. So again, you're right.
Even last night, you were smoking a doob.
But it's not true of everyone. And
you're right.
They haven't been able to do good research because it's illegal to research an illegal drug.
Very good point there.
Because wait and find out what the truth is before we make all these claims. Because I don't think you're using some antidotes and some stuff that people talk about, but it's not entirely accurate, and it's not true of everyone. Just like some people can smoke pot. People tell me, they know doctors and lawyers that smoke pot, and they do really well. I don't know any of them.
Okay.
And I'm in the business.
Okay, so
but I do know a lot of people whose lives have been destroyed by it.
Sure,
and I don't think you're giving the other side of this.
Oh no! In fact, you'll find in the world of people that are pro marijuana, I am one of the most forthcoming ones to say it's not for everyone. That it is not for people that have pre-existing mental health conditions. It's not for people that have problems that marijuana could exacerbate. But that's something you could say of every drug out there. There's a lot of people out there that cannot drink. My dad was one of them. He was an alcoholic. He could not drink. It was very, very bad for his life. But nobody suggested that we go back to alcohol prohibition. No matter how bad a drug is, prohibiting it makes it worse.
Well, and Roy, thank you for the call. Well, I would disagree with you on that because we see what's going on in Oregon. We see what's going on in Colorado with the stinky parks where the weed heads come in. I say that with all due respect, Radical Russ. And they take over the park and it smells like a big joint.
I think what we keep coming back to is this idea that somehow people aren't smoking marijuana now.
Well, they're doing it at your vacation rentals.
They're doing the vacation rentals. They're doing it in parks. They're doing it in back alleys. I was one of those guys in Idaho that was sneaking around the back alleys, sneaking into the parks. The legalization of marijuana didn't change Oregon or Colorado. They were already heavy pot smoking states before the legalization of marijuana.
Well, let's go back to the phones. Tea Party Bob joins us now, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tea Party Bob. You're on with Kevin Miller and our friend Radical Russ.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Thanks for having Russ on this morning. I think he's given us some additional information that no one else has presented on your show so far. And let me start by saying that I'm not a user of cannabis, either recreationally or medically. Russ may not know that I'm your nemesis when it comes to hemp and medical marijuana, but I have to admit that many of his arguments for medical marijuana are very cohesive and make more sense than the arguments against the use of this herb, which has been helping many sick people deal with their diseases. Now, what I don't agree with is the recreational use of marijuana. Never have, as I've seen a godson of mine get on marijuana at 16 and die at 44 from using hard drugs. So while I agree with the use of cannabis for medical purposes, I do oppose its use when it comes to recreational drugs. And by the same token, the libertarian in me says that people need to be personally responsible for themselves, and government needs to stop trying to protect us from everything that we're doing. And they need to be able to make their own decisions, especially about alcohol and cannabis. I do have one question, though. Do you believe that the drug companies and chemical companies still feel threatened by the legalization of marijuana because of the many things that it will throw out of whack when it comes to their products?
Oh, well, thank you for those questions. And yeah, I absolutely believe that. We have the evidence in the 2016 election. In the state of Arizona, when they were voting on the legalization of marijuana, one of the largest, if not, if I'm remembering correctly, the largest contributor against the effort was a company called Insys Therapeutics. $500,000 donation by Insys Therapeutics, a company that was later found to have been lying and misleading people about their fentanyl spray that they offer. So already they're in the business of offering an opioid that they knew marijuana would compete with. And then on top of that, after the election, they went ahead and applied for an FDA grant, FDA waiver on their new cannabis-based drug. So talk about rent seeking. These guys were trying to keep marijuana illegal so they could corner the market on the medical side for themselves.
Right, but before we start whining about Big Pharma, which nobody likes, let's go, Russ, to your little friends, your acolytes in Ontario that flooded that poor town so they can have pot shops everywhere. And you know and I know that there's going to be a lot of big money behind this medical marijuana initiative here in Idaho.
Well, there has to be.
Everybody does it, though. So, I mean, that's just democracy. People spend money.
Yeah, there's going to have to be money because trying to get an initiative passed in the state of Idaho is one of the most difficult of the 26 states that have initiatives, and thankfully not more difficult thanks to the veto.
We tried to make it more difficult, and I don't know what's going on with the governor on that one. But, you know, the Tea Party Bob, thank you. Anything else?
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to interject one more thing. You know, we see the problem with the drug companies. You're going to see, do you think we're going to see the same problems with other companies as hemp is introduced and being used for a lot of different purposes that are going to compete against other corporations?
I think if they're wise, they will try to incorporate hemp into some of the stuff they're already doing. Like, for example, there's a company called Scott's Miracle Grow that they sell fertilizers. They're getting big into the cannabis market now because they can see how that can improve their business. For manufacturers, there's a substance called hempcrete, which is a carbon neutral hemp building product that can be used. Hemp can be used to make plastics, can be used to make oils. There's just a myriad of uses for it. I don't think so much that the other companies are going to fight to keep it illegal. Rather, I think they're going to fight to get a share of that for themselves.
All right, Tea Party Bob, thank you for the call. We go to Eric in Cuna. He's all about your cause there, Radical Russ. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. If you're just tuning in, our friend Radical Russ joining us, Boise Hemp Fest. An annual event. He's fired up about it. To me, I've called it the Trojan horse. On the other hand, you think that the horse has already arrived.
The horse has arrived, and it's made of glass.
Eric, he's very passionate. I'm sure he'll be on your side on this issue. Go ahead, please.
Well, of course I will. And the first time I tried, I'm 45. First time I tried cannabis, I was 12 years old. It was right here in Idaho, where I'm from. And I want to say I'm not a liberal. Okay, I'm not a hippie, but I do believe in individual freedom, and I do believe in cannabis use. And back to what you guys were talking about, you know, okay, I had an ex-girlfriend several years ago that used alcohol, and then all her bad decisions were always blamed on alcohol or drugs. So, you know, alcohol and drugs don't walk and talk. People do. People walk and talk. And it's real simple for people to be unaccountable for their own way they treat people and the decisions they make and getting in trouble and stuff. It's real easy to blame a drug and to say, well, I was on this and you know, that was my big problem and that's why I did this and this and this and this. Guess what? Drugs and alcohol don't walk and talk. People do. So, you know, using drugs as a crutch for not being accountable for bad decisions is ridiculous to me. And I totally believe in legalization because
well, you're wrong. And Russ is wrong. You're all wrong.
I don't.
You know, you guys can laugh at me, but Governor Little and we're standing by no drugs.
Hey, Kevin, I did have to tell you one thing. You know, Hillary and Joe Biden, total anti-pot, just so you know.
Well, tell that to her husband.
William Barr, the new Attorney General, Trump's Attorney General, he's for total legalization.
Well, not in Idaho, he isn't.
Well, I know. Once it becomes legal across the entire country, Idaho will be the non-pot island, I bet.
And you know something? We're going to do Russ's business in reverse for people that want to come to a clean, non-pot infested smelling place. They can vacation in Idaho.
It's always been here, though, Kevin.
No.
Yeah,
it hasn't.
It's always been here.
Well, sure it has.
Been here.
Sure it has. I was here from 1990 to 2003 smoking pot with many of my friends. 6% of the Idaho population smokes marijuana on a monthly basis.
We don't need to make it 12%.
It doesn't. But here's the thing.
More.
You're mistaking the fact that legalization is somehow going to invent new pot smokers.
It does.
It does not. The people
It goes mainstream.
No. The statistics show in my state and all the other states that have legalized marijuana, the youth use rates either stay the same or decrease. The rates that go up are people 50 and older. The people 50 and older have tripled in their use of cannabis in the past 10 years.
Hey, now that's hitting our demographic. Let's go to Roger in Idaho City for Radical Russ and Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, Roger.
Hello. So this last guy that was just talking about the drugs don't walk and talk and all that good stuff. Well, I have a lot of people in my family that have been using and or been alcoholics at one time or another. And I'm just going to say, and myself as an alcoholic as well, since I stopped doing that drug, alcohol, I have not had any problems in my life. My life has exceeded well over my initial expectations. All my friends that still do smoke pot and or drink, their lives aren't so great right now. So I'm going to have to say that the majority of the people that do that stuff do not have great lives. There's a bunch of people that think they're maintaining it, but you can still see that they're alcoholics and that they need help. So I don't agree with him at all.
Well, I think what we're experiencing here is what's called confirmation bias. You already have a belief about something, and then you seek out the evidence that confirms what you already believe. It'd be like if I asked an emergency room doctor who sees drunk driving wrecks day after day what he thinks of alcohol. He'd have a terrible opinion of alcohol. But if we talk to someone who's at a cocktail party enjoying people and enjoying social interactions, there'd be a bunch of different interpretation of that. And now I agree. There's all sorts of people that shouldn't use drugs, that have a bad effect when they use drugs. But in your case, you said you were an alcoholic. Would your life have turned better if you'd have been arrested and thrown in a prison for drinking beer?
That's what I'm telling you. Since I quit, that stuff didn't happen.
Right, but I'm saying if alcohol were prohibited like marijuana and you were arrested for it.
I know do not have good lives. Everybody I know that does this stuff does not have a good life.
You don't know me, and I have a great life.
By.
You don't know me, and I have a great life.
I know tons of people that do this stuff.
Sure, I can find a whole bunch of people who drink who have terrible lives,
no, that's
and
what
I can
I'm
find.
I don't know anybody that has a normal life that does this stuff.
You don't know anybody who drinks who has a normal life?
I don't know anybody. Right? They're not.
Everybody who drinks has a bad life. Everybody.
They do.
Everybody who drinks has a bad life.
Their wives, they get divorced.
Everybody.
They don't have a chance.
Everybody. So the listeners out there, if you enjoy a beer on the weekend, you have a bad life.
A beer. People don't have a beer.
Okay, so if you have a 6-pack of beer this weekend, you have a bad life.
They probably do.
Okay, well, I can't argue with that. If you really believe that everybody who recreationally enjoys alcohol has a bad life.
Why are they drinking? If their life is so great, why are they drinking?
Well, maybe they enjoy the effect of drinking.
Something. They're trying to alter the way they feel.
See, I agree with
Roger. They don't like the way they feel.
I agree with Roger.
That everybody who drinks has a bad life.
I think it's an escape.
Everybody who drinks has a bad life.
It's totally an escape.
So we've got presidents.
Are you an alcoholic?
We've got senators. We've got, we have senators. We have representatives.
Are you an alcoholic?
What's that?
Are you an alcoholic?
No.
Then what makes you think you could speak for one?
My father is an alcoholic. Nearly died 2 times in DUI wrecks.
Do you know exactly how he feels or why he drank?
My father is the chief petitioner for the Medical Marijuana Act here in this state.
Ooh, we're going to have to talk to him.
Why did he drink? Why was he an alcoholic?
Because he had an addiction.
All right, Roger, I got to run. I apologize. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. All right, Russ, we're out of time. Quickly, if people want to get a hold of you.
You can find me at Radical Russ online on Twitter and other social media.
Thank you, brother. Good morning, Dave.